Hello everyone. It is a great pleasure to share with you this material on the biblical story of creation. The idea is to present it in several videos, starting with this one, in which we deal with the difficulties in understanding the words evening and morning, which end the description of each of the first 6 days. The biblical account of creation is a very old text, probably more than 3,000 years old, and also very well known and debated. A beautiful, short, and objective narrative, easy to understand in a quick read. However, in a more detailed reading, it is not so easy to follow it, but it has a provocative sequence which challenges us to understand it. So let's read the text to situate exactly what interests us. Genesis 1. In the beginning God created the heaven and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, Let there be light, and there was light. And God saw the light, that it was good, and God divided the light from the darkness. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night, and the evening and the morning were the first day. In the original, these are the terms we need to evaluate. Light, which was called Yom in Hebrew, darkness, which was called night in Hebrew Laila, morning in Hebrew Boker, and evening in Hebrew Arab. 4 names linked to the initial composition of the days and, at the same time, very familiar in our day-to-day. So we imagine that what happened on the first day would have been something like this. The light appeared, was separated from darkness, and composed the first period of light. And in the sequence of the text, the darkness that already existed was called night, and the clarity was called day, so we would have inaugurated the first dark-light pair. This seems to agree with what Calvin had to say about the first day. We know that darkness was previous to time. When God added the light, it was to enclose the day. Very well, so far it has been easy. The problem starts now. If the text said, and it was morning and evening the first day, everything would be simple and we would probably not be here talking about it. But the text doesn't say, and the morning and the evening were the first day. It says the opposite, and it was evening and morning the first day. And when it quotes the evening before the morning, things get complicated. So let us see. When dealing with this text, Augustine tells us, we see indeed that our ordinary days have no evening but by the setting, and no morning but by the rising of the sun. But the first 3 days of all were passed without sun, since it is reported to have been made on the 4th day. But what kind of light that was, and by what periodic movement it made evening and morning, is beyond the reach of our senses. Neither can we understand how it was, and yet must unhesitatingly believe it. Augustine seems to present, better than anyone, the problems related to the interpretation of the first day. Regardless of the presence of the sun, which we will talk about later, he asks, but what kind of light that was, and by what periodic movement? And why does he say that the evening and the morning made escape our senses? Perhaps because it would have been probably more natural for the text to start the day in the morning, as we have already seen, or else, and this seems more pertinent, because according to the development of reading, we have not been able to compose a complete day, which can be called first day, as we will see. But first, we need to talk about the meaning of the original Hebrew term boker, morning, and Arab, evening. Boker translates as break of day, beginning of day, properly dawn, generally morning. And what do we understand by morning? The part of the day from the time when the sun rises or one wakes up until the middle of the day or lunchtime, during the early part of the day, at some time between midnight and 12 o'clock in the middle of the day. In accordance to these definitions, morning is related not only to the apparition of the light that starts the day, but also to the period of increasing clarity that characterizes the first half of the day. And Arab, by its turn, translates as evening, sunset, night, twilight, which means the part of the day between the end of the afternoon and night, taking afternoon as the time between the middle of the day and the evening. In other words, evening relates more properly to the extreme of clarity that ends the day, leaving to afternoon the larger period of the second half of clarity that starts at noon and continues until sunset or the evening. Very well, we have seen already that the text does not say morning and evening, as we usually identify the passing of the day. Therefore, this option is foreign to the text and should be disregarded. We then have two other options. The first is to describe the darkness or darkness that preceded the first apparition of light as evening, and as morning the initial apparition of light. But this would not be appropriate either, since the darkness that preceded the light was called night, not to mention that the first day of light would be deprived of the evening segment. And the second option, probably the most accepted as we usually listen and learn, is the one that reproduces the Jewish way of counting the days, and this would be very natural, considering that the text was written by ancient Hebrews. In this way of counting the days, the evening would correspond to the end of the first day of light preceding the second night, which in turn would be followed in the morning. Very well. Therefore, in addition to avoiding the main event of the first day, the apparition of light, since it only begins to count the day in the end of clarity, it also leaves out the entire course of the first day of light. And not only that, this way of counting the days also presents other problems, more important than this. If not, let us see. This night, understood after the first evening, cannot be the first day, because the night of the first day was the darkness that existed before the light appeared, and therefore that night, which comes after the first evening, must be recognized as the second night. And if that's the case, the morning after the second night would not be the first day, but the second, described shortly afterwards. In this way, the first day of light is not completed, because it would be without a morning. And that would also bring us an unthinkable anomaly. If the morning described in verse 5 is understood after the second night, we would only have a full daylight with the evening described in the verse 8. In other words, the period of clarity of the first day of light, the object of the creation of the first day, would only occur then on the second day. Given this, what to say? Is it not possible to understand the biblical description of the first day of creation? Well, we probably cannot understand it because the evening and morning described there do not allow them to be recognized by the way we perceive the passing of the days and time, and perhaps this is why Augustine said that they escape our senses. However, with the use of advances in the understanding of time brought by 20th century physics, we would probably be able to have a more satisfactory reading of the days of the first week, especially the fact that the evening is mentioned before the morning, as we will see at the end of this reflection. But before we get there, we need to address the main concepts involved in the investigation, talking a little more about the days and also about history, sunsets, time, etc., which we will do in the following videos. See you next time. God bless us.